Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started here. And again, want to thank you for joining this evening's program. And as I said, we'll go through some national charts. We'll go through some local trends, hear what we're seeing in Richmond, and Katie will share what she's seeing in San Francisco. And then we'll go through some anecdotal stories along the way. And we had some questions that people submitted beforehand, so we'll look to address those along the way. And please submit any that you might have through the chat feature. And again, my name is Roever. I'm a graduate of the University of Richmond, class of '88. I've lived primarily here in Richmond since that time frame. I've been a licensed agent for 20 plus years and with Joyner Fine Properties for 10 plus years. We're a boutique firm about 5 minutes from campus, and we're in the Libby and Grove area. I work primarily with buyers and sellers and investors and flippers. And if you haven't come to Richmond, I would encourage you to check it out. We've seen a tremendous amount of growth here in the last 10 years. It's a diversified economy, a diversified population. There's lots going on. We're attracting a lot of people from outside the area, particularly with COVID. And look forward to sharing some of the things that we're seeing with you today. And I'll let Katie introduce herself.
Thanks, Drew. So I'm Katie Fones. I graduated from U of R in 1991. And I'm originally from Baltimore and moved to San Francisco about 10 years ago with my husband and my dog at the time. I still have the husband, don't have the dog anymore. But we love living here, and I'm really happy and thankful to Mary Alice for including me in this program tonight. I think she might have picked San Francisco as the market to compare Richmond to, because San Francisco is sort of unlike any other city in the country in a lot of ways, and certainly real estate here is, it's different from Richmond, but in talking with Drew in preparing for tonight's program, learned that we have a lot of things in common. I think the pandemic and COVID-19 are having similar effects on people nationwide, but I think it's going to be really fun tonight to hear how things are similar and how things are different in these two towns. So I do miss Richmond. My entire family now lives in Richmond, so I definitely hear about the housing market from them. My sister's house hunting now, and my parents just bought a house within the last couple of years. So I know more than I thought I would about the Richmond real estate industry. Happy to be in that spot. So, all right, Drew, we're ready for the slideshow.
All right. So what's changed with COVID? Probably the biggest thing, and you've all seen this or heard this in the paper, is a major inventory challenge. National Association of Realtors saw 19.2% lower inventory at the end of the third quarter of 20 over 19. So there's a lot of things that are driving that. I personally have had some clients that have postponed putting their homes on the market because they have small babies, small children at home, and just want to be extra protective during this time. And I'm sure Katie's seen some of that as well. Sometimes elderly folks, they're just a little bit more concerned and just don't want random people, even with COVID-19 protocols in place, coming through their homes. We're seeing a little bit more requests for more space and larger properties. Where a 3-bedroom might have done it in the past, a lot of folks are looking for that 4th bedroom, or sometimes a 5th bedroom or home office flex space. And they want that extra guest space as well, because people are coming now and staying a little bit longer. And we're also seeing the boomerang children coming back, college students, several members of the family, all working at home. Some of you might have experienced this on speakerphones, and people are just really looking for that additional space.
Yeah. I would say similarly here, inventory is an issue. Although I think headlines lately have been that people are fleeing San Francisco. And that's not exactly true. There are people leaving, but for as many people that are leaving, there are people who are either coming here, not as much as before, and not as much as there will be in the future, but more than that, it's people who are renting, who want to buy. So we have a lot of buyers who are out looking with a lot of money sitting in the bank that they haven't been able to spend for almost a year now on vacations and other things. And our inventory product is a little bit different in San Francisco. We have a huge condo market. So we have condominiums with 600 units. We have condos in 2-unit beautiful Victorian homes, but there are a lot of condo units here in the city, which is, I think, a little bit different than Richmond. But the same overall picture is the case. We have a problem with inventory, a lot more buyers than sellers right now. So.
Yeah, and then some of that is people are looking for, here in Richmond, you can get outside 30 minutes and be out in Goochland or Amelia, some of these more rural counties, and that's become popular. We're getting requests from other agents looking for a small farmette, a general person's farm, 3+ acres or land to build. So we're seeing some of that as well. Single family existing home prices increased in all measured areas. They do 181 metropolitan areas with the National Association of Realtors, and all of them increased in Q3. We're also seeing some increased rental requests where we've got people relocating here. They're looking for a furnished executive home or property, or sometimes people have sold their homes very quickly and they need a place to go, or they lost out on a home because of competition. And then we're also seeing people looking to renovate their homes and looking for a place to land while they do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We don't really have the rural piece here. Not that I handle anyway. If people move out of the city itself, it's usually a referral that I would make to someone because the city is small. San Francisco is only 49 square miles, which I think as a tourist seems much bigger. But living here, it's a pretty small city. It's a small, big city is what we like to say. But we have seen the single family home prices increase for sure because there aren't enough, and there are lots of people who want them for space reasons, as Drew has mentioned. But also the condo market in comparison here has suffered quite a bit because most condos don't have an outdoor space, and even a small patio gets you, far if you're a seller these days. If you don't have any kind of outdoor space, the condos are slightly harder to sell. So it's been kind of a strange situation. If you're in the market for a condo here in San Francisco, you're going to get an amazing deal, which 12 months ago, those words were not coming out of my mouth. So if you bought a year ago, you're not selling now. But if you're ready to buy, it's a terrific time. The last point on Drew's slide about buying without seeing, I'm really fascinated to hear his take on this because that really doesn't happen here in San Francisco. We've got a very small segment of the market where there are young professionals, probably in their 20s, who have parents who will buy homes for them. So occasionally I'll do a FaceTime with mom, in another time zone, in another country, and technically they're buying it sight unseen because mom hasn't seen it. But we don't see a whole lot of that. So that does sort of fascinate me because I'm not at all surprised that that's what's happening in Richmond, but I definitely want to hear from Drew more about that.
Yeah, so NAR came out with 25% of people writing contracts in the spring had purchased them without physically seeing. So is that something you can do? Absolutely. We've got Matterport. I'm sure people have seen that online, pretty much a 3D sort of experience that puts you right in the room. I think sometimes the downside of that is you can really zoom in on something and see almost too many defects. So from a seller's perspective, not always ideal. I've done the virtual tour and FaceTimes now for several years and have probably sold about 7 or 8 homes that way, anywhere from $400,000 up to $900,000. And knock on wood, they've all worked out really well. And part of that is building the trust of the client. So what I do is I meet with them virtually or over the phone and go through the whole process with them. So go through the buying process, go through the contract. So when that time comes, they know what to expect. And really set expectations, understand what they want, what their needs are, what their requirements, what their lifestyle is, so we can match up the right property to them. And then when we do that, we'll go through it and, I'll do it just like I would show a home, where I'll start from the outside, pan things slowly. So you really need to get your techniques down. So it's something that's worked out. And it's building that trust. And here's a couple of quotes from people. We did all our viewing through video calls, and Drew's attention to detail really let us allow to get a feel for the spaces. So many times we felt that we were physically there. So again, it's about building that trust and knowing what to look for. You know, a lot of times I'll point out the defects, like zoom in on something and let them know, hey, this would come up on an inspection. So it's, again, it's a reality here. And I haven't done this, but I've had showings set up where what we'll do here, or folks will do, and it might happen out in San Francisco as well, Katie, is put a property out on a Wednesday. Showings don't start until Friday. And then Thursday, you'll get a notification that it's under contract. So this is completely sight unseen, where folks are buying a home off of only the photos online or the video.
Yeah. So I think the virtual media piece of real estate marketing has come about 10 years fast forward in the last 8 or 9 months. There always has been, you know, videos. Sometimes people would have videos of their properties as, you know, for listings that you could see on Zillow and the like. But the quality of it, the Matterport product that Drew referenced is a 3D experience, which is a fascinating technology. I mean, you really feel like you're in the home as much as you can feel that way without being in it. So it's pretty incredible. And I think for us here in San Francisco, because we've been pretty well locked down for a long time, oddly, our mayor has been conservative about that piece of the pie. She's not super conservative about other things, but I won't digress. But she's had us locked down. So we're pretty, you know, proud of how well our city has withstood the level of infection. So we're pretty careful in real estate about not having unnecessary showings. So these Matterport presentations and things like that have really helped us expose a property to people enough so that they can feel like, okay, if I'm ready to see it in person, I'm really ready to see it in person, and kind of mean it. And the other piece, I might be jumping ahead, but the other thing that we're seeing a lot of here in San Francisco is before you can get an appointment to see a property in person, some sellers are requiring you to present a copy of your pre-approval letter from your bank, or proof, you know, that you can pay for the property in cash, to sort of weed out the people who used to just, which we all did, pop in on an open house on a Sunday because you wanted to, not because you were even looking to buy. So it's just another way to sort of protect both buyers and sellers. You know, so that's been kind of a new thing that we're seeing a lot more of. But yes, the virtual media, virtual tours, super helpful and somewhat time saving, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point. We'll talk about that a little bit later. It's just making sure you've got your folks pre-qualified, and people will stipulate that in the agent-only notes. Please ensure all buyers are pre-qualified, pre-approved. So yeah, this way, I think we're getting less of the tire kickers, like you mentioned, Katie.
That's a good expression. We call them looky-loos, but like I said, I used to be one. I think I maybe still would be one of those. But anyway.
So how has COVID-19 affected the national real estate market? We'll go through that. Since the beginning of the COVID pandemic in March, nearly 400,000 fewer homes have been listed compared to last year, leaving a gaping hole in the U.S. inventory. Now, as a result, home prices are accelerating at double last year's paces. So again, it's kind of simple supply and demand is really what we're seeing there. And then months inventory of homes for sale. And again, all this is local, and we'll dive into that a little bit deeper when we go through our slides for our markets. But generally we say neutral market is 6 to 7 months, a normal market, meaning if everything kept selling at the same pace, it would take 6 months for the existing inventory to sell through. And right now we're really under 3 months and under 2 months. And if you focus into the micro of certain parts of town, it would even be a week or so. So it's just incredibly competitive and really tight inventory.
That is true here as well, for most aspects of our market.
And then this is a Q2 2020 year-over-year homeowner equity gain. So as you can see, we're pretty much seeing this throughout the country. Where we are in the middle Atlantic, we've seen some pretty good growth here. Virginia, North Carolina, you know, the western states as well. So people are building up equity in their home, which is a good thing.
That's probably the top question that I get from people, no matter what kind of market we're in, is how long do I have to keep this house before I can, you know, build some equity in it? And honestly, it used to be easier to answer that question. I think probably Drew, who's been in the business much longer than I have been, you have some history and some statistics and track record to support your answer. And we can still use those things, but COVID-19 has just thrown everything into, a tailspin. So it's a little harder to predict.
It is, and that's a really good point, because that's what I'll almost, pre-qualify something with, like, this is not a normal situation where we're in right now. So certain trends continue, but there's just anomalies that you can't account for because of everything going on.
Yeah.
The seller traffic index. So this is where we're seeing, a lot of the most activity through Keeping Current Matters, which is the service that we do that delves into market statistics and NAR. So some of the areas that you're seeing a lot of people moving to, the Midwest, obviously Colorado, Wyoming, a lot of folks, as you've heard, Katie, moving to Idaho and Wyoming out of California, and Connecticut. My sister's an agent in Connecticut, and she's just seen an influx of people, leaving the city, wanting to get out of buildings, wanting to get out of the shared spaces, kind of like you talked about, Katie, with the condo market.
Yeah.
Just really wanting to have their own space. So Connecticut's been a big recipient of that, and I would say Virginia as well.
Well, and I think, one of the things that, again, a lot of people who I talk to in my family, or just, friends and family on the East Coast in general, ask me, if San Francisco is becoming a ghost town. And I think one of the reasons why it really isn't in reality is because if people think that they can leave and move to Idaho and keep their San Francisco based job, what I've been hearing is that they aren't going to be paid the same salary as they would be if they'd stayed in the city. I mean, the cost of living here is clearly extremely high. And it's not extremely high in some other places where they might have thought they could stay for extended periods of time. So that's a little bit of the feedback I've gotten about why there won't be, and hasn't really been, this mass exodus of people who are in these tech jobs. So it's my little anecdote for San Francisco rumor mill.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. Here we're not seeing that as much. I mean, we're really seeing an influx of people coming down from DC and Northern Virginia, because if they need to get up there, they can go up on a train and or drive up in 2 hours time generally without traffic. So there's an article with people not too long ago about somebody who came down here, and he's like, hey, I can buy a historic home in the Fan for the same price that I was paying basically for my rent in DC. So we're seeing a lot of folks coming from out of town who are finding appeal in the metropolitan area and everything that Richmond has to offer right now.
Yeah. I think one of the cool things about Richmond that I miss from having lived there, as a student, is how close you are to such a diverse way of living. Like you mentioned a few minutes ago, you can be 30 miles out and have a gentleman's farm, which I really like that expression. Can't really get that here. I mean, you can get to the snow in 2 or 3 hours, but nothing gets cheaper. You don't necessarily get more land if you go an hour or two outside of the city. So it's just a little bit of a different, obviously a little bit different out here. But I think that's one thing I sort of miss. I love San Francisco, but if there's not as much room to breathe as close as there is in Richmond. So.
Yeah, and that's something we talk about when people are coming here or they're being recruited is just the variety of options that you have. So if you want to live in the Fan, you want to live in the Museum District, you have that options. You want to live in the suburbs off River Road or where have you across the river. There's just so many options, and then you can get out of town, 30, 40 minutes and have your acreage and your horse farm. So there's a lot of really good options that we can offer people and that they find appealing. So here's just some general trends that we've seen as we pull out of the pandemic, that consumer spending is up, the stock market is up again. So as you were saying, Katie, earlier, people have the money and they have the inclination. It's just that right now the inventory is not there.
Right. What we've seen recently as a result of that, at least I have personally, the offer I wrote yesterday that we were chatting about when we were together on the call, all cash, people making offers with no loan at all and just paying cash because they've, sort of been stockpiling money. And that's tough. That's tough to compete if you have a multiple offer situation, but is what it is. And
yeah, it is. And we will talk about that a little bit later, but and sometimes people say cash, but it's not cash. A lot of times they can still get a loan, but they can show they have the cash, the proof of funds. So it's not contingent upon financing. But with rates being this low, many folks are like, okay, why not get the loan? But again, the deal, the offer is not contingent upon the financing. So that's huge.
Right.
And that's something I often say, especially around this part of town. Kitty, as you mentioned, your sister and siblings, a lot of times with these first-time home buyers, I'll say you're not necessarily competing with your peers, you're competing with your peers' parents who have sold a home somewhere else and have the cash and are coming to Richmond for the lifestyle or to be closer to their grandkids, their children, what have you. So that's really a phenomenon that we've seen a lot. Again, yeah, competing against that cash, it's really, it can be just, be a little disappointing when you're a first-time home buyer. We'll talk about that a little bit more. How has COVID-19 affected the Richmond market? So I'll just run through a few slides here. Again, the inventory for single family and condo, we're looking at under a month, basically. And as we move into December, I'm sure that's going to decline. So it's just amazing how much it's gone down. And there's the graph, and you can see, over this time period where we would have 5,000, 6,000 homes in the market at any one given time, now we're down to a couple thousand. For an area this size, it is not a lot of inventory. And then the month's supply.
Yeah.
Same thing there. How many are actually on the market? So it's just incredible, and that's creating the competition that we're seeing, especially in the resale. And then, going back when things would be on for 6, 8 months on average, now down to a month, it's simply, it's unbelievable. And then, similar to what you're seeing in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. I mean, days on market here, and I'm sure, just generally speaking, that's one of the first things people look at, when they see a listing is why has this place been on the market for so long? And days on market here for a single family home is just 10, 12 days, maybe any longer than that. It becomes, a mystery, or there's something wrong with the property, in fact. So this is always COVID times, non-COVID times. People always want to know about days on market. And it's a great statistic. You have to know. There is always a reason why. If something is sold quickly or is sitting, there's always a reason. It doesn't always mean something's wrong with the property, but there is always something. Devil is in the details, as they say.
Right. And sometimes it might be a week, but it's actually a matter of a day. Because like I said before, people are putting homes out on a Wednesday, letting folks view it through the weekend. And then, if fortunate enough to receive any offers, will be reviewed Monday or Monday evening, Monday at noon, wherever it might be. And that's adding to the days on market count. So it might show 7, but in actuality, it would really be a day.
Yeah.
So
that's where it really does come in. And this we could spend an hour talking about marketing and strategy and off-market listings, pocket listings, and all of that. But I will give a little plug to realtors everywhere, because people think they can do this on their own. And you can, if all you want to do is try to find a house on Zillow and, maybe get a good one and hope to get a good deal. But to truly get the best value, in whatever that means to you, and find a property at the right time, you have to have somebody who's in the know and knows what's going. These one-day properties, they're real. That does happen. And if you don't have an agent, you're never going to get one of those houses. So anyway.
Definitely. And also, as you know, I'm sure just, having the rapport. I get a lot of, when I have a listing, a lot of agents wouldn't even call, they'll just strictly text. And texting certainly has its place, but it's just so important for you to reach out to that agent, I feel, and just start to have that dialogue with them, let them know a little bit about your buyers, understand what's important to their sellers, and having dialogue.
Well, and the other thing is, my grandfather, who was a successful real estate agent, which is sort of partly why I went into this business after having a different career for a while. He used to say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And in real estate, I mean, I think that is vitally true. If you aren't known and if you don't know people, then you're not going to get that text or phone call, as Drew's saying, about a listing that's coming up that doesn't have a for sale sign out front yet. And just relationship building is so important in this business. So find somebody, if you're looking to buy a home, find somebody who's been doing it for a while or is, well connected and friendly. There's some real estate agents who aren't friendly, and I don't know how they make a living. It boggles my mind.
Yeah.
So anyway.
This is true. So yeah, here's our average sales price, which you can see has been going up steadily year over year, whether in the condo or the townhouse, the condo or the single family market. Condo, generally a little bit less appreciation, but it's been really strong of late. I think it's just the influx of people coming. And then, the buyer dynamics has changed. You don't have the family with, 2.3 children as much anymore, a lot more divorces, a lot more single people. People just, in different situations. So we're seeing, a lot of single people buying, and the condo really has a lot of appeal, townhouse, because I call it with lock and go, where they just don't have to worry about the maintenance and can be gone and travel, which isn't happening as much with COVID, but we've definitely seen the appreciation. Here you can see, over the last 12 years, how it's gone up, came down during the Great Recession, and then has gone back up. And then we've really seen the spring, just sort of that hockey stick acceleration. Really, I would say after Memorial Day for us. I don't know if you experienced the same thing there, Katie. We had a really strong spring market. I've got a graph coming up that we'll share that shows the amount of showings, and it just dropped like a cliff in March, and then it steadily started to come back up. And then I think here in Richmond, really since after the Memorial Day weekend, it opened up a lot more.
Well, I think what happened here, was for the first 2 weeks, people panicked, people froze in place. At least me, I felt like it was going to be over in 2 weeks when our kids' school closed and said, well, we'll see you on, April 1st or whatever. I was like, okay, I can handle that. Well, now here we are, it's November. That didn't really pan out as they suggested it might. So people panicked. And then I think for us, things really did start to pick up in real estate in April, because people stopped wondering what they were waiting for. It's like, well, this might not resolve itself and the switch might not flip right away. So let's kind of get back to living and buying and selling and those kinds of things. So we've had a little bit more of a steady progression since, as I said, since April. And when people say to me, when should I list my house? Should I wait until after X, Y, or Z? Now I'm saying, no, I think if you're ready to sell your house, you should sell it for all these reasons we're looking at on these charts. I mean, the inventory is so low and the demand is so high. So that's been my advice, because normally I would say, wait until after Labor Day, or wait until after Christmas or Super Bowl, or, whatever the case may be. And all those rules are at least temporarily, in San Francisco anyway, sort of out the window.
Yeah, usually I would say that. The one thing that is interesting is if you look at this is the, from Showing Time. It's an app we use to manage showing requests. Mm-hmm. And you can just see how it just started up and then just dropped, come COVID. I mean, we were like online to have a great spring, and then things fell apart. What's also interesting, I like to point out, is how it dips around a holiday weekend. So I'm not a big fan of listing, on or going into a holiday weekend. There's different philosophies on that. But when you look at charts like this and you see the number of showings dip around July 4th, around Labor Day, that, as a realtor, you want to expose the home to as many people as possible. So it always boggles my mind when people put a listing ahead of a holiday weekend. But yeah, the typical timeframes and things have definitely shifted. Like you said, the demand's so high that people are like, yeah, go ahead and put it out now. And plus, here and it's somewhat true, I guess, out there as well. It's not like the Northeast where you get these crazy cold winters. We'll get 70, 80 degree days here in December, and And,
Yeah.
the market is basically, the spring market starts kicking off in mid-January, February now.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite stories, I'll just tell this really quickly because this is so San Francisco. This is before I went into real estate, but one of my friends was looking to buy a house, and it was really competitive time about 4 or 5 years ago. And her real estate agent told her to wait until the week of Burning Man. So Burning Man is like this huge outdoor festival in the desert that I had never heard of before moving here. So I guess I was living under a rock. I don't know, but I had never heard of Burning Man. So Burning Man is really a thing in real estate because half the city would go to the Nevada desert where there's no cell service on purpose, and check out. And she got the house of her dreams during Burning Man week. So I just love that story. I mean, you really do need to know what is unique to your location, in your city. So since being in real estate, I'm very aware of Burning Man, even though I've never been.
And that was actually one of the questions. Somebody said, when's a good time to buy a home? And, looking at the prices that we saw in the graphs, I mean, typically prices go down over the winter time, and a lot of people take their eye off the ball, with the holidays, or they just kind of hit the pause button. So I always encourage people, if you're a bargain oriented type of buyer, and right now I like to tell my clients, I'd love to get you a bargain, but it's not necessarily bargain time. That aside, generally this time of year can be a good time because some folks, again, do hit the pause button or, are distracted by other things.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
timing is everything.
Yeah. So here's, we'll go through Katie's slides on the market update on San Francisco.
So I'm going to confess, and Drew and Mary Alice already know this, but I don't normally wear these glasses. So I also wear reading glasses, which I need to put on top of these glasses so I can quickly look at my graph, which you all can see. And I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time going over with any specificity because I look foolish with 2 pairs of glasses on, and you can read it probably better than I can. But I think it really is similar for some of these longer term trends that Drew's been talking about in Richmond and nationally. It's not too different here. As I said before, it's really the difference, I think, at least between here and Richmond, maybe has more to do with the condo market, but that's just because we have a lot of those, and that's a pretty big segment of sales on a normal yearly basis. But those are just sitting, and that's probably not what this slide is about. This is about home prices. But so
yeah, but you've got the condo on the lower end, so that shows that dip kind of starting in August, September.
It's a combination of the amount of inventory, but also in a lot of these buildings in San Francisco, the HOA dues, the homeowners association monthly dues that you pay over and above your mortgage and your interest and property taxes covers a gym and a pool and a conference center and a concierge at the front desk. Well, there is no gym. Nobody's using the gym here right now. Pools are closed. So all these things that you're paying $1,000 a month for, which is a lot of money. I know everybody's gasping. Everybody in Richmond is gasping. It's $1,000 a month for these HOA dues, but you're getting almost nothing for it. And there's, you don't get it back and you don't get a break. So that's partly contributing to why condos are a little bit deflated in price and moving more slowly. So, but those things will come back. Oh, so this is good. This is a good one. I mean, this is true. Evidence of April, March, February is kind of slow, and then a pretty healthy uptick. And that's, yeah. Okay, let's see. Buying and selling activity. Good one, but I can't see any of that, Drew.
Okay. Buying and selling condos lost.
Yeah.
So you got under contract, where you can see your, homes under contract dip down, obviously going into April and May, and then have uptick back through July and August.
I feel like
and then here's your days on market.
Oh, yep. Well, I guess I'm surprised a little bit about December. I hadn't thought about the condo market in December, but yeah, that tells the story, as we've been sort of saying. And I think if you're in the market to buy, you're either a first-time buyer, or you're a seasoned person who's buying a second home, or is selling something and then buying something else, which Drew was talking about earlier, as far as you're competing with somebody who maybe just cashed out of a property they've owned for 30 years and are downsizing, for example. So that's the other factor, when you're looking to buy, is just knowing who your competition is going to be, and understanding maybe what product and location is best for you, so that you can really get what you're looking for, unless you've already got your heart set on something specific. If the more open-minded you are, that's where your real estate agent comes in, can say, look, if you're willing to go out another 5 miles, speaking about Richmond now, because 5 miles for me is the next town over, or just like here, neighborhood by neighborhood makes a huge difference. You can be literally on the one side of a main street here in San Francisco and be in an amazing neighborhood, and you go literally across that main road and you're in a less desirable neighborhood. It's right across the street, but people will pay more to be on the right side of the street. So if you're not familiar with that sort of distinction in the area where you're looking, those are good things to kind of know and factor in, because you can get a good deal and be within shouting distance of the people in the higher rent district without paying higher prices.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. Exactly. Telling our clients to, broaden their horizons a little bit. If they don't have an affinity to be in a certain area, like, oh my gosh, I have to be in the Fan. I've always wanted to be in the Fan or the museum district here in town. But if you've got the flexibility to go across the river, across the James a little bit, exactly, opening up and expanding your search, and or also considering new, which we mentioned a little bit as well, looking at new construction, because that's an option as well, just to give yourself more choices.
We don't have a lot of that here. We do, of course, it's mainly new condo construction, because there's only so much land here. But yeah, it's a little bit of a different process of buying, which we could talk about again under another webinar, but you definitely need a real estate agent for that. I have people telling me all the time, oh, I'm just going to work right with the developer.
Right.
I mean, that's like getting charged with crime and hoping the prosecutor, cares as much about keeping you out of jail as they do putting you in jail. It's like, no, you need someone who's looking out for you and not both sides. So,
that's exactly it. Because then you wind up using their closing attorney or agent, and then you have really no representation throughout the whole process. So it's something I agree, strongly recommend. So, what are we seeing out there anecdotally? Katie referred to this earlier with a offer she was writing yesterday. So we're continuing to see multiple offer situations throughout the market. Escalation clauses are pretty popular here. Sometimes agents will say, hey, give us your best and final. So you just got to go with what you think is you're comfortable with. And part of that is the no contingencies. So waiving, the big three contingencies: financing, inspection, and appraisal. And people are waiving all of those or portions thereof, saying purchaser will absorb the first, 10,000, 20,000 of any potential discrepancy between the sales price and the appraised value. Mm-hmm. And or waiving the first 5,000 of inspection items. Mm-hmm. Another item I didn't mention here is rent back. Being the seller's market, saying, hey, we'll let you stay there for, a period of time for free, or for your daily, what we call your daily PITI, or daily principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So that's some of the things that we just say, just layer these things on top of each other to make your offer as competitive as possible.
Yeah, this is really learning experience for me a little bit too, because we don't really use escalation clauses at all in San Francisco. I mean, it exists and people ask me about them, but they're just not used. So this is just a good example of, like, let's say you're looking to buy an investment property in a town that you don't live in, and you think real estate and how it all works. It's important to work with someone who, again, keep kind of going back to this, but who knows what they're doing, because you don't want to go waltzing in and start talking about escalation clause and this, that, and the other, when maybe that jurisdiction doesn't adhere to that or doesn't follow that practice. And the other, one of the things that doesn't exist in California is, somebody wants us to explain escalation clauses, which I'm going to let Drew do, because I don't really.
Yeah, I was going to say that. That's a good question. Okay. So an escalation clause is basically saying you're writing your offer. Say the asking price is $500,000. You would say purchaser is willing to pay $1,000 over any verified offer up to X amount, wherever you're comfortable. So some people say 535. I like to kind of pick an oddball number,
Mhm.
536, 537, because at that point, I mean, you got to draw a line somewhere, but basically it's just putting a number out there that you're willing to escalate to for that particular that offer and that property. And along with that, because you could say, okay, we'll pay $1 million, but if it's still up to the appraised price, then it's going to default to that. So a lot of times with an escalation clause, we'll see that accompanied by a waiving of the appraisal or an absorption of any differential between the appraised value and the purchase price. So I hope that answers your question.
It's an interesting strategy because my sister and her husband made an offer on this house in Richmond about a month ago, and they called me to talk about the escalation clause. And I knew what it was, but I talked through with them, you know, whether that's just showing your hand in a way that maybe doesn't work to your advantage. I mean, it's very strategic. You have to decide, you know, with the advice of your real estate agent, whether it makes sense in that given scenario. Because I can see where sometimes it would be super helpful, but we just strategize and do it differently here. We don't use those, and I can go into all that, but it's just it's a market by market way of handling offers.
Definitely. And some agents say no escalation clause, give us your best and finals, and you just got to come out with where you're willing to go to. And I agree, it is one of those things where you're willing to tip your hand. So it can play out in all sorts of ways for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's hard to, when I'm working with a first-time buyer and they say, you know, let's talk about, because if we're ready to write an offer, you know, let's talk about how this is going to look. I mean, there's so many different ways things can play out, and some of it you can control, and, you know, you put your best foot forward, but then you can't control a lot of it. You can't control who else is coming to the table. You can't control who the sellers are and what their motivations are for selling, you know, you can learn
what somebody's motivation is for buying. Because I say to somebody, like, those people that are literally buying the home, not even through a FaceTime, or buying it before it was even being available to be shown, like I'll tell somebody their brother, their, you know, a family member could live down the street, and they've got, you know, some motivating factor that we just can't account for. Or I'll say, after they've lost a couple of homes, people come out with both guns blazing, where they're just willing to, you know, go all in and just kind of go crazy. And with these low rates, I'm like, well, if you're ever going to sort of overpay for a home, now would be the time to do it, because you're essentially almost paying yourself back if you've got, you know, a 2 to 3, 5 year horizon. So, but what this leads to, Katie, and you've seen it too, is what we call buyer fatigue. So we tell our buyers, you need to be patient and you need to be prepared. So, you know, get your financing, get with a lender, get pre-approved, which is a little bit more than pre-qualified. It's a little bit harder to do right now because, you know, the lenders all being slammed with all the activity, and the underwriters are pretty busy. Yeah. But pre-qualified, you know, more of a high level, and then pre-approval, you're starting to give the lender all the documents you'd have to give them anyhow. But again, cash is always king. So trying to get beyond that buyer fatigue, and as we said before, looking at new or expanding the search area.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, until you've sort of lived through making an offer and not getting a property, it's hard to get past some of the hurdles that that a buyer might have in his or her head. So, and you can explain it all you want to somebody, but again, until you experience it, it's a little hard to appreciate. So we try to get the first offer we make for somebody accepted, right, Drew? It doesn't always work.
We try. But when you're competing against 10 or 12 offers, I mean, there was one, I mean, the agent had just way underpriced it, and they wound up getting 24 offers. So it's just creating a lot of work for a lot of people and a lot of disappointment. So, but that's what we're seeing out there. And unfortunately, those first-time buyers are taking it on the chin, because looking down here, renters want to be in their own place, and a lot of them, depending upon where you're closing, I've had clients where the rates are so low, and we got them a relatively good deal in that $250,000 to $300,000 range, where I'll be at closing, I'm like, wow, this has got to be close to your rent payment, and they're like, it's lower than my rent payment. So we're seeing that type of phenomenon as well, which is driving activity.
No, that's fantastic. Our price points are a little bit different here, but same idea. I mean, because the rents are also, for the most part, higher. So it does sort of pencil out for a lot of people.
like I say, it's all relative. So
it's all relative. Yep.
so the buyers definitely need to be prepared. You need to look at expanding your search area. We've seen a little bit more back on the markets because even if people are waiving some of these inspection items, sometimes things just fall apart where people are like, well, if I'm paying top dollar, they should take care of X, Y, Z. And then the seller's like, well, if you don't want it, we had 3 other offers behind you. So we've seen a little bit of a increase uptick in that, and also in withdrawn from market, where people sometimes will temporarily take something off the market just because of, you know, the COVID scare or things of that nature.
Yeah. But to understand what all of that means is, you know, you can get better perspective with working with an agent. Because I get calls all the time from people saying, well, I saw on Zillow, you know, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, that's not really, it's not really real. We need to talk about where you should be looking. Because, you know, I think there are a million of these real estate websites, and some are much better than others for actually getting good information. But I'm sure I have a website, Drew has a website, you know, we all have specific, unique places to look for properties, but bigger, you know, bigger picture searches. I know people use Zillow and Redfin and all of that, but they're not consistent and they're not 100% reliable. So just keep that in mind. For better or worse.
It's a really good point, because I'll see homes that will say, oh, it's in, the client will email me or text me, oh, like, this just came up, it's in the county. I'm like, no, I know exactly where that home is, and it's not in the county, it's in the city. So, you know, that affects schools, taxes, other things like that. And I say, you know, to your point, Katie, they have a lot of good information. So I'm like, you just got to triangulate it with MLS, because that's generally really the most accurate for homes that are listed.
That's a good word, triangulate, because that's exactly right. I mean, you can't, as a buyer, a layperson, you know, you shouldn't have just one source of information, but yeah, you should definitely check it against the MLS, which is probably, hopefully, the best source of data, and then, you know, some other places too, but yeah. So.
And then from the seller's perspective, you said before, like, hey, you know, something's sold within 2 weeks, you know, what's wrong with it? So generally, people are sometimes overreaching. They're seeing their neighbor's home sell for a certain amount, like, oh, we can get this, and, you know, we'll try and counsel them. But we're seeing a lot quicker price adjustments sometimes if somebody's overreached. You know, sometimes it's as much as 25, you know, not just a little $5,000 kind of drop in price so it hits MLS and all the searches again, but really significant price adjustments. So they're getting the activity and that they want.
Well, one of the things out here that fascinates me even to this day is that it's a thing to significantly underprice properties in order to generate this complete frenzy, multiple offer situation, and, you know, driving the price up. And it is just the way it is. And I have so many buyers who I work with who cannot get their heads around it. And I'm not being critical. It's not easy, because logically it doesn't make sense. Like, they're listing it for sale for $1 million. Why can't I get it for $1 million? I'm like, well, that's not the price.
Exactly. So I've had the same conversation, not as those numbers sometimes, but like, look, I know this home, I know the numbers, it's not going to go for that. Like that one I mentioned with 20+ offers. So it's just unfortunate, because you're getting people's hopes up by doing that. And it is a fine line. You do want to price it competitively so that you do drive multiple offers and terms and conditions. Again, it's not always about the price. Sometimes it's about the rent back and flexibility or things of that nature. But yeah, it can get a little crazy when they underprice it by that much.
Yep. Good times. I will say that buying real estate, the process should be fun. I mean, it's a serious thing. It's a lot of money. It's most likely the biggest purchase you'll ever make, but it should be somewhat enjoyable. So, and if you're looking, you know, to work with a real estate agent, I would say interview more than one person, you know, because presumably you'll be spending hopefully not a huge amount of time with them looking for houses, like years, you know, but a couple of months. And then you want someone who you trust on your side when it comes to these negotiations, which are very serious and high stakes. But it should be a little bit of fun along the way.
Yeah, I agree. You got to make it fun and part of the process for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you.
That's it. We had for the slides. I'll go back to that just to what we were seeing. So our pictures up there since our faces are, but I think some of the questions that people had was, when's the best time to buy a home?
Mm-hmm.
And, again, real estate is very cyclical. I think this time of year can be a good time. We talked about it a little bit earlier because people are kind of taking their eye off the ball for the holidays, and if the inventory is there, it can be a good time to strike.
Yep. I agree with that for sure. I mean, I think, as I said before, timing is everything. And if you have the wherewithal mentally to focus on buying a house over the holidays, I think you can really have that pay off for you. But when people ask me specifically in San Francisco about when they should buy, my answer always has been and always will be, if you can afford to buy a home in San Francisco, you should. Because it will be, as long as you're not going to try to sell it in a year, which is probably true anywhere, it's going to be an amazing investment. So don't overthink some of the aspects that go into buying a home. If you're ready to buy, align yourself with a great real estate agent, learn the market through that person, and you'll make a great decision.
Yeah.
Trust yourself.
Yeah, good point. And the other thing I would do is align yourself with a good lender. So you have somebody on call. I mean, just someone you can reach on the weekend in case you need to write a letter or get something specific for a certain property. That's always important. That's
actually a very, very, very big part of making an offer on a property. You can't be working with somebody who is 1-800, I will give you a loan.com who doesn't answer the phone on the weekend. That's going to backfire on you. So that's a really good point. Yeah. So.
And that's something else too. As far as timing, I want to mention, like our lenders are saying, don't even think about doing something under 30 days just because they're so slammed right now. And in the past, you could do that, like, oh, let's get a quick close. And that can have appeal, especially to a flipper or a vacant home or something that's in an estate. And we'll still try and do that, but you really got to be cognizant that, these lenders are definitely a little backed up right now.
Yeah, and the people are a little bit more forgiving as a result because it's industry wide. This is not unique to any one of these places that we're talking about. So this, I think we're wrapping it up.
Yeah.
I don't know, are we? Let's see. Okay, Mary Alice is communicating with us like Cyrano de Bergerac from behind the scenes. But I know that Mary Alice is working extremely hard, as is everyone on staff at the university, to provide these virtual webinars to people across the country and beyond. And I've done 2 of them now, one real estate related and one not. They're really run wonderfully. And there are more to come. Check out Instagram, Facebook, and your email. I think those are the three things I'm supposed to cover to encourage you to be on the lookout for others. But this has been great, Drew. Thank you so much.
Yes. Good working with you, Katie. I appreciate it. And thanks to Mary Alice for putting it together. And if anybody has any questions, our contact information's out there. You can find us on the web. And we hope you learned something. And thanks for spending some time with us.
Yep. Cheers and happy Thanksgiving. And look me up if you're in San Francisco. It'd be fun, even if you don't want to buy a condo, but I'll try to sell you one anyway.
Sounds good. And go Spiders.
Go Spiders.